The helicopter was hit and spiraling down when Major Kate Phoenix Sullivan heard enemy pilots laughing over the radio. "The American transport is finished." 2 minutes later, 7 enemy jets were burning wreckage, and those pilots learned why they called her Phoenix. Meet Major Kate Sullivan, 31 years old, red hair always pulled back in a tactical ponytail, steel gray eyes that had logged over 4,000 flight hours in the most dangerous airspace on Earth. For 3 years, she had been flying medical evacuation missions in her modified UH-60 Black Hawk. But to most people who saw her, she was just another helicopter pilot conducting routine transport operations. They had no idea that Kate Phoenix Sullivan was one of the most lethal fighter pilots in U.S. Air Force history. Kate's story began 15 years earlier, when she had graduated at the top of her class from the Air Force Academy with a degree in aerospace engineering and a burning desire to fly the most advanced fighter aircraft in the American arsenal. Her test scores were perfect, her flight evaluations were exceptional, and her tactical knowledge impressed instructors who had been training pilots for decades. At age 22, Kate had been the youngest pilot selected for F-22 Raptor training, an honor that typically went to more experienced aviators. The selection committee had been impressed not just by her technical skills, but by her intuitive understanding of three-dimensional tactical thinking that separated great pilots from merely competent ones. The F-22 program was the most exclusive and demanding fighter course in the military, with a 60% washout rate that eliminated pilots who couldn't handle the physical and mental demands of flying the most advanced air superiority fighter ever built. Kate had not only completed the program, but had graduated as the top pilot in her class, setting records for aerial gunnery and tactical proficiency that stood for years. She had been selected for F-22 Raptor training, the most exclusive and demanding fighter program in the military. For 6 years, Kate had flown the most advanced air superiority fighter ever built, conducting missions that required split-second decisions and tactical brilliance that separated elite pilots from those who simply knew how to fly. During her F-22 career, Kate had been deployed to some of the most contested airspace in the world, conducting air superiority missions over Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Her tactical innovations in beyond visual range combat had been studied and implemented by fighter pilots throughout NATO, and her understanding of enemy tactics had made her one of the most sought-after instructors in the fighter community. Kate's approach to air-to-air combat was unique in its combination of aggressive tactics and precise calculation. She had developed techniques for exploiting enemy weaknesses that other pilots couldn't detect, using psychological pressure and unexpected maneuvers to force opponents into tactical errors that she could exploit with devastating effectiveness. Her call sign, Phoenix, had been earned during her 4th deployment to Syria, when her F-22 had taken critical damage from surface-to-air missiles, but she had managed to not only survive, but eliminate the entire enemy air defense network before returning to base. The ability to rise from certain destruction and strike back with devastating effectiveness had made her legendary among fighter pilot communities. The Syria incident had demonstrated Kate's ability to adapt to catastrophic equipment failures while maintaining tactical effectiveness under extreme pressure. Her F-22 had suffered engine damage, partial hydraulic failure, and compromised flight controls, but she had used these limitations to her advantage, convincing enemy forces that her aircraft was more damaged than it actually was before launching a devastating counterattack. Over 6 years of fighter operations, Kate had accumulated 47 confirmed air-to-air kills, making her one of the deadliest combat pilots in modern military history. Her tactical innovations in beyond visual range combat had been incorporated into training programs worldwide, and her understanding of air-to-air warfare was considered unparalleled. Kate's kill record included victories against some of the most advanced enemy aircraft in service, including several engagements where she had been outnumbered but had used superior tactics and psychological warfare to achieve decisive victories. Her ability to predict enemy behavior and exploit their tactical assumptions had made her extremely effective against opponents who relied on conventional fighter tactics. But Kate's fighter career had ended 3 years ago when a training accident had damaged her inner ear, creating balance issues that disqualified her from high-G fighter operations. The medical condition wasn't severe enough to ground her completely, but it prevented her from handling the extreme physical demands of air-to-air combat in advanced fighters. The training accident had occurred during an advanced air combat maneuvering exercise when Kate's F-22 had been involved in a mid-air collision with another aircraft during a complex multi-fighter engagement. While she had managed to land her damaged aircraft safely, the impact had caused inner ear damage that affected her ability to handle high-G maneuvers without experiencing disorientation. The medical disqualification had been devastating for Kate, who had defined herself as a fighter pilot since childhood. The Air Force had offered her various staff positions and training roles, but none of them provided the sense of purpose and direct contribution to combat operations that had motivated her throughout her career. Rather than accept a desk job, Kate had requested transfer to helicopter operations, reasoning that flying medical evacuation missions would allow her to continue serving while using her pilot skills to save lives rather than take them. The transition from F-22 Raptor to UH-60 Blackhawk had been humbling, but Kate had found purpose in missions that brought wounded soldiers home to their families. The transition had required extensive retraining, as helicopter operations required completely different skills from fighter aviation. Kate had to learn hover techniques, confined area landings, and medical evacuation procedures that were as demanding as fighter tactics, but required different types of precision and situational awareness. Her current assignment was conducting medical evacuations in Afghanistan, where American forces were engaged in counterterrorism operations against enemy networks that had sophisticated air defense capabilities and access to modern fighter aircraft through foreign support. Kate's medical evacuation unit was based at Forward Operating Base Lightning, a remote installation in eastern Afghanistan that provided support for special operations forces conducting missions throughout the region. The base was located in mountainous terrain that provided natural concealment, but also created challenging flying conditions for helicopter operations. Her UH-60 Blackhawk had been extensively modified for medical transport operations, with advanced life support equipment, communication systems, and defensive countermeasures that allowed it to operate in hostile environments. But Kate had also insisted on modifications that reflected her fighter background, including enhanced sensors and weapon hardpoints that could mount air-to-air missiles if the tactical situation required them. The mission that would define her legacy had begun as a routine medical evacuation. A Special Forces team designated Ranger 7 had been conducting a reconnaissance operation in the mountains near the Pakistani border when they had encountered unexpected resistance and suffered multiple casualties. The Special Forces team was led by Captain Michael Torres, a veteran of multiple deployments who had specifically requested Kate's unit for medical support based on her reputation for conducting evacuations in extremely dangerous conditions. Torres understood that Kate's fighter background gave her capabilities that standard medical evacuation pilots didn't possess. Kate's Black Hawk was configured for medical transport, with state-of-the-art life support equipment and space for multiple wounded soldiers. But hidden beneath the medical equipment were modifications that reflected Kate's unique background. Enhanced defensive systems, upgraded targeting computers, and weapon hardpoints that could mount air-to-air missiles if the situation required them. The wounded Special Forces team was located in a valley surrounded by enemy-controlled territory, with hostile forces converging on their position from multiple directions. Standard protocol would have required fighter escort for the medical evacuation, but enemy surface-to-air missiles made conventional fighter support too risky. Kate's Black Hawk was equipped with advanced countermeasures and defensive systems that allowed it to operate in environments where other aircraft would be vulnerable. Her plan was to conduct a low-level approach through mountain valleys, extract the wounded soldiers, and return to base using terrain masking to avoid enemy detection. But intelligence reports had failed to identify a squadron of enemy fighter aircraft that had been positioned specifically to intercept American rescue operations. As Kate approached the extraction site, her defensive systems detected multiple aircraft approaching at high speed from concealed positions. The enemy fighter squadron was commanded by Colonel Dmitry Volkov, an experienced pilot who had been studying American medical evacuation procedures for months in preparation for exactly this type of ambush. Volkov understood that American forces would risk everything to rescue wounded soldiers, making medical helicopters valuable targets for propaganda and tactical purposes. Phoenix 1, this is Overlord, came the voice of Lieutenant Colonel Anderson, the mission controller coordinating the operation from base. We're showing multiple enemy fighters inbound to your location. Recommend immediate abort and RTB. Kate looked at her tactical display, which showed 6 enemy aircraft in attack formation approaching her position. Below her, the wounded Special Forces team was calling for immediate extraction, with enemy ground forces closing in on their position. Negative, Overlord. I have wounded Americans who need immediate evacuation. I'm continuing to the extraction site. Phoenix 1, you're a transport helicopter against enemy fighters. This is suicide. Kate checked her aircraft's weapon systems, confirming that the air-to-air missiles she had insisted on carrying were armed and ready. Overlord, I've been flying combat missions longer than most of these enemy pilots have been alive. Let me worry about the fighters. The first indication of enemy contact came when Kate's threat warning systems detected missile lock from multiple directions. 6 enemy fighters had positioned themselves in a coordinated ambush with overlapping fields of fire that should have made escape impossible for any helicopter. Colonel Volkov's tactical plan was based on the assumption that American helicopters would attempt to escape when faced with fighter opposition. His squadron had positioned themselves to cover all escape routes while maintaining the flexibility to pursue any helicopter that attempted to flee the engagement area. American transport helicopter, came Volkov's voice over the international emergency frequency, speaking in accented English. You are surrounded by superior aircraft. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. Kate's response was broadcast on the same frequency, her voice calm and professional. Enemy aircraft, this is Major Kate Sullivan, United States Air Force. You have 30 seconds to disengage before I demonstrate why they call me Phoenix. The enemy pilot's laughter crackled through the radio. The American transport is finished, one of them said to his wingman, apparently unaware that his communication was being intercepted. That was their first mistake. Their second mistake was assuming that Kate's Black Hawk was just a transport helicopter. The first enemy fighter came in fast and straight, using standard tactics for engaging helicopters, high-speed attack run designed to avoid return fire while delivering devastating firepower. But Kate wasn't flying standard evasion patterns. Instead of trying to escape, Kate pulled her Black Hawk into a climbing turn that brought her nose to nose with the attacking fighter. As the enemy pilot committed to his attack run, Kate launched an AIM-9 Sidewinder missile at point-blank range. The enemy pilot never had time to process what was happening. One moment he was attacking a defenseless transport helicopter. The next moment his aircraft was disintegrating around him as Kate's missile found its target. Splash 1, Kate announced calmly over the radio. 6 more to go. The psychological impact of seeing their lead aircraft destroyed by a helicopter sent shockwaves through the enemy formation. Fighter pilots weren't trained to engage helicopters that fought back with air-to-air missiles, and the tactical situation had suddenly become completely unfamiliar. Colonel Volkov's voice crackled through the enemy communications frequency, filled with disbelief and growing concern. All aircraft, the American helicopter is armed with air-to-air missiles. Repeat, the target is not defenseless. Adjust tactics immediately. Kate didn't give them time to regroup. Using techniques developed during her F-22 career, she positioned her Black Hawk to exploit the confusion in the enemy formation. Her second Sidewinder missile was already tracking toward the enemy's No. 2 aircraft before they could coordinate a response. The second kill came 30 seconds after the first. Kate had used her knowledge of fighter tactics to predict the enemy's evasive maneuvers, positioning herself to intercept their escape route with deadly precision. "This is impossible!" screamed one of the remaining enemy pilots. "How is a helicopter destroying fighter aircraft?" Kate's third missile launch came as she maneuvered her Black Hawk through mountain valleys that provided terrain masking while keeping her within engagement range of the enemy fighters. Her knowledge of air-to-air combat, combined with the unexpected nature of her attacks, was systematically dismantling a fighter squadron that should have had overwhelming advantages. The third enemy aircraft exploded in a fireball that illuminated the entire valley, sending debris raining down on the mountainside below. Kate was now engaging the remaining fighters using tactics that violated everything conventional wisdom taught about helicopter operations. Instead of trying to escape from superior aircraft, she was hunting them, using their own overconfidence against them. Fighter pilots who expected to dominate helicopters through speed and firepower found themselves being outmaneuvered by someone who understood their tactics better than they did. The fourth and fifth kills came in rapid succession as Kate exploited the enemy's panic and poor decision-making. Fighter pilots who should have been coordinating their attacks were flying defensively, trying to escape from a threat they couldn't understand. Colonel Volkov's final transmission came as his own aircraft was targeted by Kate's last missile. "Command, this is not a transport helicopter. This is a fighter ace flying a helicopter. We have been deceived." Kate's final two missiles eliminated aircraft that were attempting to flee the engagement rather than press their attack. She had turned a coordinated ambush into a rout, destroying an entire enemy squadron using tactics that would be studied in military academies for decades. 2 minutes after the engagement began, 7 enemy fighters were burning wreckage scattered across the Afghan mountains, and Kate's Black Hawk was continuing to the extraction site as if nothing unusual had happened. "Phoenix 1, this is Overlord," Lieutenant Colonel Anderson's voice carried amazement and disbelief. Did you just shoot down 7 enemy fighters?" "Confirmed, Overlord. 7 bandits eliminated, continuing to extraction site to pick up wounded Americans." The radio silence that followed lasted almost a minute as everyone monitoring the frequency processed what they had just witnessed. A medical evacuation helicopter had single-handedly destroyed an enemy fighter squadron using tactics that shouldn't have been possible. Kate reached the extraction site and conducted a textbook medical evacuation, loading 6 wounded Special Forces soldiers onto her aircraft while maintaining defensive awareness in case additional enemy fighters appeared. Her transition from air-to-air combat back to medical operations was seamless, reflecting years of experience in high-stress environments. Captain Torres, despite his wounds, looked at Kate with amazement as she coordinated his team's medical care while piloting the aircraft. "Major, what you just did, that's going to be talked about for generations." The flight back to base was conducted at low level through mountain valleys, with Kate using terrain masking and defensive flying techniques to avoid any remaining enemy threats. Her wounded passengers received continuous medical care during the flight, with Kate coordinating their treatment while piloting the aircraft through challenging terrain. When Kate's Black Hawk touched down at Forward Operating Base Lightning 30 minutes later, she was met by every pilot, ground crew member, and medical personnel who could make it to the landing pad. Word of the engagement had spread throughout the base, and everyone wanted to see the pilot who had accomplished the impossible. Brigadier General Williams, the regional commander who had flown in specifically to debrief Kate, was the first to greet her as she shut down her engines. His expression showed a mixture of amazement and confusion that reflected everyone's reaction to her unprecedented achievement. "Major Sullivan," he said, reviewing the preliminary reports of her engagement, "what you accomplished today defies everything we know about air-to-air combat. How does a helicopter pilot destroy 7 enemy fighters?" Kate removed her helmet, revealing red hair damp with sweat and gray eyes that showed no trace of the adrenaline that should have accompanied such an intense engagement. "Sir, I used to fly F-22s before my medical disqualification. Today I just remembered why they called me Phoenix." Major Thompson, an F-16 pilot who had flown over 200 combat missions, shook his head in disbelief. "Major, I've been flying fighters for 8 years. And I've never seen anything like what you just did. You didn't just survive that ambush, you turned it into a massacre." Kate looked at the fighter pilot who was struggling to understand her tactical approach. "Major, the enemy made 2 critical mistakes. First, they assumed that flying helicopters meant I had forgotten how to fight air-to-air. Second, they underestimated the capabilities of a pilot who had nothing left to lose." The medical team that had been preparing to receive casualties was amazed to discover that Kate had not only survived the ambush, but had conducted a successful evacuation while engaging enemy fighters. The 6 Special Forces soldiers she had rescued were alive because she had refused to abandon them when faced with overwhelming odds. Sergeant First Class Jackson, the team medic who had been wounded in the reconnaissance operation, looked at Kate with respect that transcended military rank. "Major, you didn't just save our lives today. You did something that's going to be talked about for generations." The after-action reports from Kate's engagement became classified case studies examined by air forces worldwide. Her tactical approach was analyzed as a perfect example of adaptive thinking under extreme pressure, demonstrating innovations that challenged conventional doctrine about helicopter capabilities in air-to-air combat. But the most significant impact was on Kate herself. The engagement had reminded her that she was more than just a medical evacuation pilot. She was a warrior who had found a new way to serve her country and protect her fellow soldiers. 6 months later, Major Kate Sullivan was promoted to lieutenant colonel and offered command of a new experimental unit that would develop tactics for multi-role helicopter operations in contested airspace. Her techniques became the foundation for programs that revolutionized how military helicopters operated in environments with enemy air threats. The unit she commanded included both helicopter and fighter pilots, creating a hybrid approach to air operations that combined the flexibility of rotary-wing aircraft with the lethality of fixed-wing fighters. Kate's experience bridging both communities made her uniquely qualified to develop tactics that maximize the strengths of each platform. Today, Colonel Kate Phoenix Sullivan leads the military's most innovative aerial warfare program, teaching pilots that the boundaries between different types of aircraft are less important than the tactical intelligence and adaptive thinking of the person flying them. Her students learn that true air superiority comes not from having the most advanced aircraft, but from understanding how to use any platform to its maximum potential when American lives are on the line. Have you ever been forced to return to skills you thought you'd left behind, only to discover that your experience gave you capabilities others couldn't imagine? Kate's story reminds us that sometimes our greatest moments come when we combine everything we've learned in unexpected ways. The enemy pilots who ambushed her that day expected to destroy a helpless transport helicopter. Instead, they encountered a fighter ace who had been disguised as a medical pilot, waiting for the moment when her warrior skills would be needed to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. If you believe that true expertise reveals itself when everything is on the line, share this story. Because somewhere, someone is being underestimated based on their current role, not knowing that their moment to prove their hidden capabilities is approaching. Kate Sullivan didn't just survive that ambush. She turned it into proof that the most dangerous opponents are often the ones who seem least threatening until the moment they reveal who they really are. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, you can subscribe to see more incredible stories like this one.